Cape of Good Hope, Cape Point. What makes them so famous to the point of even giving birth to the famous legend of the Flying Dutchman around the 1600s? Why was the Cape of Good Hope renamed from the Cape of the Storms?
You try to go up and gravity and the wind pushes you, you know what I mean?
And how did it affect sailors and their ships?
Lots of ships that have crashed here, about 22. These are the remains of some of them.
Join us on this adventure and find out. Since both Cape Point and the Cape of Good Hope are well known and quite close to each other, we'll be exploring both with you in this video. Cape Point has often been regarded as the most famous cape in the world. It has always represented a danger to sailors and their ships since the day the Portuguese explorer Bartolomeu Dias first sighted it in 1488, more than 500 years ago. Cape Point is located in the Cape of Good Hope Nature Reserve within Table Mountain National Park. The park includes the majestic Table Mountain chain that stretches from Signal Hill to Cape Point and the coastlines of the Cape Peninsula. Many people wrongly believe that Cape Point is the southernmost tip of Africa, but that title belongs to Cape Agulhas, about 150 kilometers or 90 miles to the east-southeast. We have a dedicated video on Cape Agulhas, and we'll link to it in the description below or at the end of this video, so watch that.
This is a restaurant called Two Oceans Restaurant, and they have little nooks that hides you from the wind, and it's many of them, like one here, other one here.
It's a beautiful view. Wow.
It's really pretty how they did it, and the ocean is right there, and the mountains, it's just so gorgeous.
We are going to our first stop, Cape Point Lighthouse. The funicular we are about to take was named after the local legend, the Flying Dutchman. It will transport us from the car park to see the lighthouse.
You're basically waiting right now at the lighthouse, and you're gonna go on one of these cars called Funicular, and it's like a rail, like a train.
Believed to be the only commercial funicular of its type in Africa, it leaves every 3 minutes carrying 40 passengers at a time. Running from a lower station at the Cape Point car park, it will take us up an incline through dense fynbos vegetation to the upper lighthouse.
On one of those cars because it's way cooler. So now we are just gonna walk to the lighthouse. Because this is such a high point, it's very windy here. Like very, very windy. You try to go up and gravity and the wind pushes you, you know what I mean? It's really hard to walk as you go up because gravity and the wind pushes you down.
Located about 2.3 kilometers from the Cape of Good Hope, its history is more tragic than you may think. Shipwrecks were already a concern in the Cape since the 1400s. In 1859, a lighthouse was built to help the sailors, but it caused more harm than good. It was built on Dagama Peak, the summit of Cape Point, 230 meters above sea level. This was too high and was not visible enough, causing the ships to approach too close and crash on the rocks. It was only after SS Lusitania had been wrecked nearby in 1911 that a proposal to build a new lighthouse at a lower altitude was finally accepted. In 1914, this lighthouse was built at a lower level to replace the old one. This one is also the most powerful lighthouse on the South African coast. Despite the name, this Lusitania had nothing to do with the one sunk by Germany. This one here was a Portuguese twin-screw ocean liner of 5,557 tons. It was built in 1906 by Sir Railton Dixon and Company, and it was owned by Empresa Nacional de Navegación.
This is the famous lighthouse. The water down there is beautiful. It's a bright, As you can see, there are lots of ships that have crashed here, about 22. These are the remains of some of them. There are many rocks here, as you could see, so that caused a lot of crashes back then.
Now we're going to our next stop, the Cape of Good Hope. It was originally named the Cape of Storms. On March the 12th, 1488, the Portuguese explorer Bartolomeu Dias first sighted the Cape on his way to India. He named it Cape of Storms due to the frequent storms coming from the southwest, and also a 5 knots current that sweeps up the waves to dangerous heights and creates giant rollers. After Bartolomeu Dias went back to Portugal, he delivered the news to the King João II. The king renamed the Cape of Storms to Cape of Good Hope. The new name symbolized the opening of the sea route to the east, and now India could be reached by sea from Europe. Ten years later, in 1498, an expedition led by Vasco da Gama reached India. Naming it Good Hope did not change the fact that even the most experienced sailors feared these waters after many shipwrecks had taken place there. It stole the lives of many people on board. Of all these shipwrecks, the most famous story is the story of the Flying Dutchman, a ship lost in a severe storm near the Cape. Although it's difficult to trace a legend, and we can't confirm if the ship indeed existed, it is said that in 1641, a Dutch galleon chartered by the Dutch East India Company sank off the coast of the Cape of Good Hope during a devastating storm. Neither vessel or crew, including its captain, a Dutchman who was thought to be Hendrik van der Decken, was found. After that, many sailors claimed to have seen the Flying Dutchman flying on thin air without touching the surface of the sea. On July 11th, 1881, young Prince George, who would 30 years later become King George V, and his older brother Prince Albert Victor were on board the HMS Bachante, sailing off the coast of Australia. At 4 a.m, the crew claimed to be surprised by the appearance of the Flying Dutchman. As sailors at that time were very superstitious, maritime disasters were often attributed to the Flying Dutchman, which supposedly pushed ships against underwater rocks. Nowadays we know that apparitions are caused by a phenomenon that creates mirages on the sea surface. This happens when light bends due to different air temperatures. It's like the mirage we see on asphalt when it's very hot. The curvature of the Earth causes the light to bend at the perfect point for the mirage to create a magnifying glass and reflects ships that are far away, making them appear much larger and closer, and even upside down. The mirage creates a floating illusion, as if the ships were flying in the air. Now you can understand the name, the Flying Dutchman. But of course, at that time, people didn't have this type of knowledge, and the legend became popular, even turned into a book, and later on, ending up on your television.